Hey guys, Marcus Melnick here with Firearm Mentor. Hope you're enjoying my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These little things are free to you and really help the channel. I appreciate your support. Enjoy. Thank you.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And I am going to take you guys through a journey today where you can live vicariously through me. I had some amazing experiences today. I'm recording this on Tuesday, the Tuesday before this airs, where I had a flight to Birmingham, Alabama, and then took a rental truck to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to move my son into his sophomore year as an engineering student at University of Alabama. And I brought with a book. I was going to record here. I have my iPad. I've got all my good stuff. So here I am. I'm sitting at the airport, and I'm flying American, and I'm waiting. And we got there early because my wife had to get to work, and she dropped me off early. It was on the way. So it made sense for me just to bring stuff. I brought all sorts of work to do. So I'm sitting there, and I get an email. Your seat has changed. I was in the second to last row of this small airplane, and it said, all right, well, you've been moved to seat 8, whatever letter it was. Okay, so I'm sitting there, and they're boarding a plane, and because I'm early, and I want to wait, and I go up to the person. They switched the gate on me. But dummy me, I had earplugs in, condition white, which I should not be in, although I was up against the wall, so people couldn't sneak up on me from behind. But I went up to the person, and I asked for a revised ticket, and she said, you're at the wrong gate. And luckily, it was hours before, and I moved to the correct gate. When I went to go sit down in my seat, it was the first row behind first class, did not have an exit row, yet it had double the leg room. Oh my gosh, it was so awesome. And I know a couple weeks ago we had Rick Rosenthal on, and he gave us some international travel tips, but I'm a TikToker. I go on TikTok, I look at the videos, I buy stuff. And I saw these, and I have them, but they're just not for travel. It's a vacuum bag. So you put your clothes in a plastic zip, it's like a huge Ziploc bag, you seal it, and there's a little nozzle there where you can put a portable vacuum cleaning unit and suck out all the air, and that way you get more bang for your buck. Yes, I realized I made a pun there. So I was able to travel with a carry-on. Unfortunately, going back, I'll be on United, and they don't allow carry-ons because I am a cheapskate and bought the cheapest seat. But it doesn't matter. I was more worried about my toiletries and medications, and basically I wanted to avoid the fee, but I have to have the fee on the way back, no big deal. So I get to the hotel, and I get turned around a couple times, but I ended up getting an upgrade. I'm moving my son in, so I wanted to get a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. They ended up upgrading me to a Ford F-150, so that's fantastic. Back to the airport. I was sitting there, I have this book, I was going to read it, but sitting across from me were 3 Muslim passengers. That's not at all a dig or a judgment statement. They were in, I don't know what it's called, but it's kind of like a long garment that covers their knees, and they had the equivalent to a Jewish yarmulke on, and they were going to fly. Okay, great, no problem. You're entitled to fly. I don't really care, but I didn't want to make them uncomfortable and put myself in the trick bag, so I put my book away. But the intent was for me to go through the book and then talk about it on the show. This is all going to make sense in just a minute. The book was given to me by a firearms dealer. His name's Ben Ferdinand. He is in Libertyville. Great guy. And he is very pro-Israel. And he has a charity where he provides all sorts of equipment to the military, raises funds for it. I'm not talking about guns. Yes, he's an FFL, but he's not providing guns to the Israelis. He's providing drones and other support type technology and equipment and that type of thing to keep people safe, not to take other lives. So Great guy. And the book he gave me was from Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz is one of the top attorneys in the United States, and I was in grad school from 95 to 98, and one of his books was one of the ones we had to read for my criminal justice degree. It was kind of dry and boring, but it was a textbook, so those tend to be not riveting. And in any event, he is a liberal, but he really might be a convert pretty soon because he is supportive of Donald Trump. But he's also critical of Donald Trump if Donald Trump does something inappropriate. And I'll do that both ways right now. What did Donald Trump do that was inappropriate? What was appropriate, first of all, is the Doge office. I think he tried to cut unnecessary spending in the government. I think that was a great move. Every president in the election cycle has promised to do that. Trump actually did that. That was a fantastic, positive move. Now, the negative is he saved all this money and then threw himself a very expensive birthday party and parade. That was not a good use of money. Fun, yes, but not a good use of money. So I think every president does things that we love and we don't love. So what is this book by Alan Dershowitz? Well, the book is called The 10 Big Anti-Israel Lies and How to Refute Them with Truth. And I don't read to people, but I want to go through the book with you and give you some of the content in it. And basically, Dershowitz is saying what's taking place today is not reasoned dialogue. It is shouting, sloganeering, propagandizing, protesting, demonstrating, defunding, accusing and ignoring or censoring opposing views. The tactics of pro-Palestinian, I don't want to say riots because they're protests, is to block access, shout at people, intimidate them, and even sometimes assault people with opposing views. Now, the book is about constitutionally protected speech, but constitutionally protected speech allows people to lie. Just turn on the news. So there's 10 central accusations of Israel, and this is pre-October 7th. So I'm going to go through these with you and just kind of discuss them a little bit. They are disgusting, but we'll discuss them. So the first lie is that Israel is a colonial imperialist state. And in reality, Israel is the opposite of a colonialist imperialist state. Calling Israel a colonial settler state reflects ignorance, bigotry, or both. And I need to tell all of the other people in the media, it's not pronounced Israel, it's Israel, I-S-R, Ale, A-E-L, not E-A-L. It is real, it is a real country, but the pronunciation is Israel. The Hebrew pronunciation is Yisroel, and that's the same thing in Hebrew. So colonialism occurs when one country, like Great Britain, France, Spain, colonizes another country like India or Algeria and sends its own citizens to become settlers in the colonized country. The settlers have no initial connection to the colonized country. They're not indigenous. They're not descendants of indigenous to the colonized country. They're simply there to plant the flag of the colonizing country and to exploit resources for the benefit of the colonizers. Among the most absurd things currently being promulgated by protesters and used to justify Hamas barbarism is that Israel is a colonial settler state comparable to the imperialist Great Britain or France. The reality is that Israel is an anti-colonialist democracy comprised primarily of refugees and descendants of indigenous Jews, Muslims, and Christians exercising their right to political self-determination. Jews lived in what was originally known as Judea or Yehuda, and then in the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, since biblical times. Unlike the other groups that were indigenous to the land, the Jewish people survived military defeats, exile, and dispersion. Beginning in the late 1800s, many Jews who moved to what is now Israel were refugees escaping the oppressive anti-Semitism of colonial Europe and the Muslim states of the Middle East and North Africa. Unlike colonial settlers, expanding commercial and military goals of imperial nations, the Jewish refugees were escaping from the countries that had oppressed them for centuries. These Jewish refugees were far more comparable to the American colonists that left England because of religious oppression. So those who claim that Jewish refugees immigrated in the last decades of the 19th century were the tools, quote, tools, of European imperialism must answer the following question. This is the linchpin. For whom were these socialists and idealists working? Were they planting the flag of the hated Tsar of Russia or anti-Semitic regimes of Poland or Lithuania? These refugees wanted nothing to do with the countries they fled to avoid the pogroms and religious discrimination. They came to what the Romans have named Palestine deliberately in order to hide its Jewish origin. They arrived without any of the weapons of imperialism. They brought with them few guns and other means of conquest. Instead, their tools were rakes and hoes. The land they cultivated was not taken away from its rightful owners by force or confiscation by colonial law. It was purchased primarily from absentee landlords and real estate speculators at a fair or often exorbitant price. Martin Buber, who was a strong supporter of Palestinian rights, observed in 1939, quote, "Our settlers do not come here, as do the colonists from the Occident," I don't know what that means, "to have natives do their work for them. They themselves set their shoulders to the plow, and they spent their strength and their blood to make this land fruitful," end quote. Nor was the land they sought to cultivate rich in natural resources, such as oil or gold, or strategically positioned as a trade route. It was basically a worthless piece of real estate in a backwater of the world whose significance to Jews was religious, historical, and familial. So basically, these people came to Israel and made their own way. They built things. They didn't take things, which is what happens with imperialism. So going forward, there were about 10,000 European Jews who immigrated to Palestine, and it was called the Palestine at the time, during the period, as compared to nearly 1 million Jews who immigrated to the United States. In that time, the 1880s, that's when my family immigrated to the United States from Prussia, which was modern-day Germany, Lithuania, Eastern Europe, and the borders changed. Basically, it was Russia. And I don't mean like USSR, I don't mean Russia, the country as it is today. I mean pre-Soviet Bolshevik Revolution Russia, Tsar Russia. The first Jews, the Jews of the first Aliyah, and that means going to Israel to live, produced a manifesto in 1882 in which they explicitly referred to the wave of pogroms as well as the more distant other issues that have threatened to destroy European Jewry. Now, if you go back to the movie Fiddler on the Roof, that was a pogrom. That was in Russia. Tevye and his family were split up. They went to America. It's a great movie. It's a sad movie, but it really, the music is wonderful. It's sad wonderful, but I really, really love it. So Palestine, with its relatively small population, was never without a significant and well-documented Jewish presence. By the time the Ottoman Turks occupied Palestine in the year 1516, approximately 10,000 Jews lived in the Safed region alone. In the 16th century, according to British reports, as many as 15,000 Jews lived in Safed, which was a center of rabbinical learning. Many more Jews lived in Jerusalem, Hebron, Acre, and other locations. Jerusalem, in fact, has a Jewish majority since the first population figures were gathered in the early 19th century. According to the British consul in Jerusalem, the Muslims of Jerusalem scarcely exceeded 1/4 of the whole population. Jerusalem was a predominantly Jewish city well before the first Aliyah by European Jews. By the middle of the 19th century, 30 years before the first Aliyah, Jews also constituted a significant presence, often a plurality or majority in Safed, Tiberias, and several other cities and towns. Tel Aviv had been a predominantly Jewish city since European Jews founded it on sand dunes in 1909. At about the time of the first wave of the European Jewish refugees immigrating, other waves of Jewish refugees from Muslim countries, such as Yemen, Iraq, Turkey, and North Africa, were also beginning to arrive in Palestine. These Arab Jews had little knowledge of political Zionism. They were simply returning home to escape persecution, having learned that the Ottoman Empire was permitting, or at least closing its eyes to, some Jewish immigration into Palestine. At the same time, many Arabs from what is now Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt moved to Palestine, some to work in Jewish wineries and other businesses. Based on the actual history of Jewish refugees who immigrated, the claim that Israel is a colonial or imperialist state is so far-fetched that it simply serves to illustrate how language is willfully distorted in the service of partisan agenda. Contrast the millennia-long Jewish presence in Palestine to the lack of presence or history of English settlers sent to places like New Zealand by Great Britain as part of its colonial enterprise. New Zealand is a perfect example of a colonial settler state. Israel is the opposite. Calling Israel a colonial settler state is a reflection of ignorance, bigotry, or both. I'm going to take a very small break to take a little drink, and we'll come back to discuss this more.
I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show.
We're back. And another big lie is that Israel denied statehood to the Palestinian people. I love this one. In reality, Israel offered Palestinian statehood in 1937 to 1938, 1947 to 1948, 1967, 1993, 2000 to 2001, and 2007. And each time, the Palestinian leadership refused. It's a lie to claim that Israel denied statehood to the Palestinian people. In each case, it was the Palestinian leadership that refused to agree to this two-state solution that would have created a Palestinian state alongside a Jewish state for the Jewish inhabitants. In 1937, in the midst of a terrorist revolt inspired by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, the British published the Palestine Royal Commission Report, also known as the Peel Commission Report or the Peel Report, and it based its investigation on the cause for disturbances. It left no doubt about who was at fault. One side put itself, not for the first time, in the wrong by resorting to force, whereas the other side has patiently kept the law. The commission realized that the murderous violence against civilians that began in the 1920s had been deliberately ordered by the Mufti and the Arab High Committee. It is also confirmed that the Jews who had come to Palestine were refugees, calling Zionism a creed of escape from the persecution suffered by the Jews of the diaspora. In the broadest sense, it saw the problem as fundamentally a conflict of right with right that was rooted deeply in the past. After reviewing historic claims of Jews and Arabs, the commission found them both compelling. The Peel Commission found that the sympathy of the Palestinian Arabs within their kinsmen in Syria had been plainly shown. Both people clung to the principle that Palestine was part of Syria and should have never been cut off from it. It also found that it would be wholly unreasonable to expect the Jews to accept minority status in a Muslim state, especially since they had essentially created a Jewish home with Hebrew newspapers, Hebrew schools and universities, a Jewish hospital system, and an active political and labor union system, and all the other attributes of statehood. The Jewish areas of Palestine were more like an ongoing state than the Arab areas. Tel Aviv was a Jewish metropolis with a population exceeding 150,000. West Jerusalem had a Jewish population of 76,000, far exceeding the Muslim population. Haifa, with its population of 100,000, was half Jewish, and much of the business at its port is Jewish business. Local democratic governments, as well as a national agency, featured nearly 20 political parties. Democracy had come to the Jewish area of Palestine, and so has Jewish art and culture. So it's very interesting. This report is 100 years old, and it's still going on and on and on. One of the things that I always concerned myself with was that my son going to Alabama, the Bible Belt, the Deep South, holy cow, there's going to be a lot of anti-Semitism. And the interesting thing is, it's the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, when I was driving from the Birmingham airport to Tuscaloosa, what happened was I had to pull over and I took a picture of a billboard. Now, I've seen this billboard before in the Chicago area, and the billboard says you don't have to be a Jew to protect Jews. And it's by an organization called Jew Belong, JEWBELONG.org. It is a great, great sign. And as a matter of fact, the stress to logic part of my business, that's speaking and training. And I do have a seminar on how to react to anti-Semitism, how to identify anti-Semitism that has intent or that's just ignorance. And we go through different examples. We go through different gang signs. Some gangs have adopted the 6-point star. And then when they tag places, oh, that's anti-Semitism, they hate it. No, it's not. They don't hate the Jews. They don't even know who the Jews are. They are honoring their 6 main tenets of that particular gang, and it's represented by a 6-point star. All right, back to talking about Israel and the whys. Following the end of World War II, the UN also recommended partition of the area into 2 states, one for the Arab population, the other for the Jewish population. Once again, the Arab leadership rejected the 2-state solution, while the Jewish leadership accepted it. The Jewish leadership declared statehood in the area allocated to it by the UN. The Arab leadership responded by declaring a genocidal war against the new state of the Jewish people. They didn't want a Palestinian state, and they also didn't want there to be a Jewish state. As soon as Israel declared its independence, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon attacked it with help from Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Libya. Arab armies, with the help of Palestinian terrorists, determined to destroy the Jewish state and exterminate its population. The first attack on Israel came from the air. Egyptian aircraft bombed Israel's largest civilian center, the city of Tel Aviv. An Associated Press account on May 17, 1948, described the attack as, quote, Arab planes hit Tel Aviv, Tiberias, invader hammering Jewish outpost. As with virtually every previous Arab attack against Jews since the first refugees arrived in Palestine and even before, the targets were innocent civilians. The pattern of past and future fighting was thus established. The Arabs would target soft civilian areas, cities, towns, kibbutzes, trying to kill as many children, women, elderly, and other unarmed civilians as possible, while Israelis would respond by targeting soldiers, military equipment, and other lawful targets. The Egyptians and Jordanians also captured land for no other reason than to increase their own territory and to control their Palestinian residents. By the end of the war, according to historian Benny Morris, the Arab war plan changed into a multinational land grab focused on the Arab areas of the country. The evolving Arab plans failed to assign any of these whatsoever to the Palestinians or to consider their political aspirations. A key part of the Arab plan was to complete the marginalization of Palestinians. Jordanians wanted the West Bank, the Egyptians wanted Gaza, and neither wanted an independent Palestinian state. Nobody can blame Israel for the Egyptian and Jordanian decision to occupy lands allocated to Palestine for a state and for denying Palestinians the right of self-determination in those lands. Those are incontrovertible historical facts and are not subject to reasonable dispute, but omitted from pro-Palestinian pseudo-histories of the period. The occupation of Palestine by Jordan and Egypt was never the subject of UN condemnation or even an expression of concern from human rights groups. Indeed, it was not even widely protested by the Palestinians. After the Six-Day War of 1967, which resulted in Israel recapturing the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, Israel signaled its willingness to negotiate land for peace. However, the Arab League met and issued the famous 3 no's: no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiations with Israel. This led Israel's ambassador to the UN, Abba Eban, to quip. I think this is the first war in history that has ended with victors suing for peace and the vanquished calling for an unconditional surrender. According to Bill Clinton, former president, the Israelis in 2000 to 2001 offered to withdraw from approximately 96% of the West Bank and 100% of Gaza in exchange for peace. Palestinians were offered land swaps from Israel in exchange for the small amount of land that would remain under Israeli control. Yasser Arafat rejected the offer and initiated a series of terrorist attacks that left thousands dead. In 2007, Prime Minister Olmert offered an even better deal. Once again, Palestinian leadership did not accept the offer. As one Israeli leader put it, the Palestinians don't know how to take yes for an answer. So it's incorrect to claim that Israel denied the Palestinian statehood. The Palestinian leadership did. When we return, we'll be continuing the conversation about the 10 big anti-Israel lies, and I don't think we're going to be able to cover all 10 of them in this episode, so this may be a carryover or to be continued for next week. Stay tuned.